Hi. Welcome back, Fantasy Fiction Fanatics. It's great to see you again, and I hope you're doing well. So today we are going to be finally starting the first 5 chapters of Dragons of Winter Night, which is the second book in our Dragonlance Chronicles series. Hope that you are enjoying the book just as much as you enjoyed the first one at the beginning here. Before we get into our actual lesson for today, I want to do a kind of a disclaimer or a warning that my apartment doesn't really have AC at all. It just doesn't come with it. And so in order to film, I had to turn off my very annoying, very loud fan so you can actually hear me. So if I'm like sweltering and like dying over here, it's okay. It's just because it's really hot, so hopefully I won't be noticeably dripping with sweat, but I'm sorry if that is the case. There's nothing I can do about it at this point unless I turn on the obnoxious fan and make it so it drowns out my voice. So, yeah, wonderful. Alright, let's go ahead and get into our recap for the day. So we start off with the poem, which is a recap, a little bit, at least of the characters and a little bit of what happened in the first novel. And then we move on to the prologue of The Hammer, which talks about how the companions had gotten the hammer of Karas, I think is how it is. And they give it to the dwarves as a gift, which allows the refugees that they saved from the Verminiard's mine, in order for them to stay there. They let the refugees and the companions stay there because they gave them the hammer. And then they decide that they're going to check out Tarsis the Beautiful, which is semi-near, and they want to be able to get passage for a boat in order to sail away and get somewhere where they believe is going to be safer than they're at right now, and they don't want to stay with the dwarves. So the companions go ahead and set out for Tarsis the Beautiful to see if they can find a boat. Sorry if you hear that, that is my printer. And then they get there and they find that it is landlocked. And even though they enter the city, they are then, part of them are arrested because we see a little bit of Tarsis's background with the knights, and because they see that Strum is a knight, they go ahead to the inn, and half of them get taken in to be arrested while the others wait at the inn. And then at the very end, we do meet Alhana, who has also been arrested for being in the city when she was told to leave. Pardon me. Sorry about that. Okay, so there's our recap. I still need to work on getting these recaps down. I know that I really do not do well on them. Let me know if you have any suggestions on how to recap it better down below. So, there's quite a bit to talk about because, again, we're back to not totally square one in the fact of how we started with the first book, but we're back to the beginning of a book, so there's a lot more to talk about, a lot more to get into, a lot more to keep in mind, things like that. So we're going to go ahead and have quite a bit of different things to discuss in this lesson. Some things I decided that we're just going to talk about later or a little bit more broadly just because there was so much information. So go ahead and get comfortable since it's going to be probably a very full hour-long class. We'll just see how it goes. Maybe it'll end up being shorter, but I do have quite a bit to talk about with the beginning of this book, going all the way back to how are we starting a book and things like that. So lots more than just the events and the actual specific information to talk about since we are starting a new book. Even though it is continuing the same story, we still want to see how we are beginning this book and how it is different than beginning the first book, things like that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to start from square one, which is the poem / recap of the first book. So let me go ahead and really quick look in the book here. This one's called The Song of the Nine Heroes, and it's not too long of a poem. It's just about 3 pages. So it has, in the poem, it has little verse for all of the characters and a little bit about them, and it has a couple of verses about their journey through the first book and what happened. So basically it's just an overall recap of who we have in the story and what the basics of what happened, and so now we're here kind of deal with the poem. So my first question to you, this is a question that, I would love to hear your answers in the comments below, and it's just a question for comments. It's not really something that I felt that we had to really truly discuss, but I just wanted to know what your opinion on this poem was, as well as what you felt about it, how you like the fact that the recap is not a prose recap, it is a poem recap. Me personally, I like this form of a recap much better than a prose recap, especially with coming from one book directly to the second one. I find a lot of times books that have recaps at the beginning can get really annoying and tedious. Yes, I know that it helps the reader to remember where they're at and what's happened in the previous book or books, but for me, especially going from one to the next to the next to the next, recaps get really redundant. This is even the case with television shows and things like that. I'm just like, come on, I just watched this, I don't need a recap. Or I just read this, I don't need a recap. I want to just get to the next thing. I want to get to where we're going. I want to get to the storyline. So for having it as a poem, and it's a very short poem compared to some of the other poems that could have been written. It's succinct, it's to the point, we get details enough for us to remind ourselves of who we have and where they're at, and then we're moving forward. So I don't have to waste my time reading a whole chapter that could be up to 15-20 pages of okay, this is everything that happened, and giving a whole bunch of detail and making it kind of a whole big synopsis thing, like a multi-page thing. It's just quick to the point. Here are the characters, here's where we're at, this is the main important thing that happened, and let's roll into the story. So that's my personal opinion. I would love to know your personal opinion on it in the comments below. So the real question, though, that I brought this poem up for was why put it in a poem form versus the prose form. Now, this I feel like kind of goes, there's kind of 2 parts to the answer for this. And part of it kind of goes to, I kind of came up with because of the way I like it. I think that this is probably also another reason as to why the authors would have done it, would be because it is short and succinct and able to get to the point easily and then start our story. So I feel like, and this might not be, obviously, this is just my opinion, but I feel like that is one of the 2 reasons that the authors did what they did. They didn't want to take, like some authors do, a whole chapter or a whole big summary in prose form and really write out oh, this happened and this happened and this happened and this happened, and really make it a big, huge recap with lots of details and lots of explanations on a bunch of events that happened in the first one. They're like, hey, you read the first one. We just want to make sure that if you haven't read the first one for a while, you're reminded of the characters and the main important thing that happened at the end, so that way you know where we're getting to now that we're starting again. So they made it a poem because a poem is a way to, the form in general is a way to put big, broad, expanse ideas into a short form, into a form of short lines, most of the time not full sentences, something that is succinct, clear, and to the point, something that captures a lot of information and is able to break it down to really embroiled in the word choice and into the way that you combine those words, put them together, and set them down. And so it's really a condensed version. So the authors probably thought that that would be a good idea to bring it in as more of a short form than doing a full-blown big recap. The second thing I wanted to mention about the poem that I feel like is why they did it as a poem versus prose is that we start off the first book and end the first book with a poem. So the first poem is kind of a way to bring people into the world. It's got a little bit of Huma in it, a little bit of the Queen of Darkness, good against evil, kind of like what they're going to be facing in the book. As we go along, we'll discover that that's very similar, but it's also a way to like see what kind of world it is. It has dragons, that there's a Dragonlands, that it's got myths and legends that go with this world. It's very much a poem that leads readers into the novel, and something that's like to show this is what this novel is going to be like, and this is an introduction, this is a way to get us into this novel. While the last one is kind of a transition, just like the wedding is a transition from all the adventure into being the end of the story and kind of giving us that pause moment. The Song of Huma talks a lot about like the Dragonlands and who Huma was, which we know a bit from Strum. But with this poem, it's kind of going along with the stopping place. It's trying to show, hey, this is where we're going to be able to get to information that's going to lead us into the next book. So we have the two poems that sorry, like my brain is just not working at the moment. That kind of bookend, there we go, bookend, each, the center of the book, the actual book itself. And so the same thing is happening with this one. They started and ended with a poem, now we're starting, and I bet by the time we get to the end of the book, there's going to be a poem at the end to bookend it as well. So it's the theme or the style that these authors have done for these books that are why they probably chose this poem to start this book for another poem to get us going into the novel. And the way they wanted to get us into this novel was by a recap and the telling of these 9 companions that then started to help save the world. And now we're like, okay, this was them from that book, and now let's start and see where they're at now. So it kind of goes with their theme of how they wanted to make the book be set up. Okay, next thing is going to be about the prologue, which I believe it was called The Hammer. Let me double check because in case I'm wrong, but I'm 99% sure. Yep, The Hammer. And The Hammer, the prologue is meant to be a way where we see where we're at now. Kind of where we get into the book through this prologue, just like we do with the poem, but this prologue shows where we're at, and we are not at the very point that we left off on. We're not just after the wedding. It's been a couple of months. The companions have already gotten the hammer of Koras, and they are giving them to the dwarves in order to get safe living in the mountain for the refugees that they saved from Verminiard's mine. So we're not starting right where we're at, and this prologue is showing us this is where we're at now. This is where we're going to dip into this book and into the story again. So they had a short break, and now we're here at this point. This is where we're going to be taking the story to the next point. So the question is, why not start directly after the wedding? Why not show them getting the hammer and giving it to the dwarves and all those things that are in between that we did not get? It's a very tough question. It's the kind of question that only the authors truly know the answer to. Only they are the ones that really know what they decide, like why they decided to do it this way, but I think it's because they realized that getting the hammer was not the starting point that they wanted. Meaning that, yes, it's a starting spot, and yes, they could go through and show you, but it's not really where the meat of the story is. Yes, that time passes, yes, that does progress the story, but it's not where the trouble starts. It's not where the interesting part of the story starts, if you catch my drift, where they get the hammer and it might be, some exciting points in that, some action, things like that, but it's not where the heart of the story and actually where we're going to be getting to starts. They wanted to start closer to where actually the next leg of the journey is going to start, where the next portion of the meatiest portion of the story is going to take place. So we don't have to trudge through all the hammer portions and then finally get to it. It's like we're going to start right where things get good, right where trouble is going to start, right where things are going to be going bad, which we do see when everything at this point is going bad. So yes, they did have the good point where they found the hammer and they were able to find refuge with the dwarves. But now the second they've started looking for Tarsus to sail the refugees to another portion of Kryn, we've gone downhill. So it's like this is the port where the trouble starts, and so they decided to skip over the other stuff just to get to the good portion, the action portion, the part that's going to really push the story forward, instead of wasting time starting all the way back to getting the hammer. So they just decided, let's go ahead and start where we really think that the next exciting portion, the next part where we move forward toward our goals is going to be. Let me know what you think about the prologue and us where we're starting and the feel of it and everything else like that down below in the comments. I would love to have a conversation with you about it. Truly, truly would. Okay, so let's go ahead and get to our next topic. I know the prologue went kind of fast, but I feel like we covered the important bits, and the prologue, being a prologue, wasn't very long. So, okay. The next thing I want to talk about is kind of the generalized topic of how are we starting this book off? We know what it was like to start the first book off. Now let's see where we're at on this start. What do we see with the starting of this book compared to the first book especially? How does it differ? How are the characters different from where we left them? As well as where we started with them. How is it going as the tone and the what is the word I'm looking for? I'm sorry. I always have it in my brain, and then when I try and say it, it's like not there. Kind of the feel. So we've got the tone and we've got the feel. It is kind of different, if you know what I'm saying, how tone and feel are different. Because right this moment we've got the first book, and we kind of do end on a bittersweet note. We've got some good and we've got some bad going. But when we start this story, how is it different than the start of the first one? Is how I want to compare. So the first difference that I see right off the bat is its dark tone. We see that there is pessimism in it, especially between Tanis and Strum in that prologue. But also, as we continue into chapters 1 and 2, we see the pessimism, especially from Tanis, of what's happening to come, especially like with Tarsus and this other stuff. We see the depression, the pessimism, the darkness of feelings and atmosphere, because we're in this dark dwarven mountain Everything is very much dark and despairing a little bit at the beginning of this story. So that is one big change from the start of the first one. The first one we don't really have, it's kind of more neutral. We don't really have a lot of happiness other than, seeing the friends again, but we don't have any like pessimism or anything else like that. It's like almost a little bit of anticipation with the start of a new journey and meeting all their friends again, but it's mostly neutral. We're just getting into the story. We're just getting to see what things are. We see that this point is where we're starting with all the friends coming together, but there's not really any particularly strong emotion that's leading off the start of the story. But this portion of the story, this book, is starting off on a very low note, especially considering that Tanis is a leader. He is down here. A lot of the refugees are like up here, but Tanis and Strum and Raistlin, all of them are down here. Very, very concerned about what's happening in the world, very conscientious of how deep and dark and bad things are. As well as we see changes in the characters. We're going to get to talking to a couple of characters specifically after this, but we do see changes in some of the characters. Even from the short break that we had, they have changed and they have evolved a bit from the first book to where we're at now. And we see that a lot of the changes are not good changes. So why are we starting at such a low point when we ended on, yes, a bittersweet point, but kind of a higher point? And the fact that the wedding was good news, the refugees were saved, nobody died or anything like that, like they thought they might with the battle with Verminiard. A lot of good things happened at the end, even though we still had that slight bit of trepidation on the coming battles and how the war is raging and things like that between Raistlin and Tanis. We really see more goodness at the end, but here we're starting so low and in such a bad state of mind, especially for the companions who are going to have to be traveling to Tarsus and trying to do these things for the refugees. They're not all of them, but there's some of them that are just very not in a good place, not in a hopeful place either. So why start here? Again, this question I feel like has a two-part answer. The first one I feel like has to do a little bit with the title. And I guess when I say it's a two-part answer, it's kind of like the same answer with two reasonings, because it kind of boils down to the same thing, but I am looking at it from two different points of view, I guess. And the first one, like I said, is doing with the title, which is Winter Night. So the last one we had is, both of them are based off of seasons. We had Autumn Twilight, and this one is Winter Night. So if we think about it as symbolism, winter stands for cold and dark and low points of despair, no hope, snow. In stories and in symbolism, it's usually a dark time where, because it's mostly night out, the sun is very short in the day. We've got a lot of sadness and despair, and that's a time when famine comes, like in the old days when you couldn't get food easily in the winter, and because you had to hunt your own food. The time where bad things happened, people stayed locked in their homes because of the darkness. More despair, more sickness and illness because of the cold, things like that. So winter has a depressing and pessimistic sort of symbolism, and we are starting the book of Winter Night. So not only do we have winter, which is already kind of symbolic for dark and cold, we've also got night, which is dark and can be cold at night. So we're already starting off with a book that is a depressing type of synonym or, not synonym, connotation and viewpoint. So along with that, kind of tying this together, stories have often have a kind of a model that they follow, especially with fantasy and good/evil stories, where we start at a point. Say here, this is our point right here. We go ahead and it's an okay point. Sometimes it's a good point, usually it's an okay point, which is where we started it with Autumn Twilight. And things get bad, and worse, and worse, and worse, until we hit a very low point. And then you hit that low point, and the story goes back up, and we feel like things are working out, and we're good, and we're good, and we're finishing, and we're defeating evil, and now we stop at a high point, at a really good ending, a good against evil and good wins kind of ending. Now, this isn't the same for every single story, but a lot of stories do follow this model where we've got this kind of U shape, or J shape, I guess I should say, because you're not starting at the same point. So we've got this kind of a J swoop that we follow. And so the first book we have is we're starting at an okay point, and we're going down. It's gotten worse because of all the things that happen. Is we see that this world is falling apart. The evil is taking over. That it is infecting everywhere. And they're trying their best to just make it through it and to do these things, but nothing is getting better, and they just see the world as it's gotten worse and worse and worse, and they just realize how bad the world is. And so now, this book, we're starting off at this low point, or getting toward the low point. We're in the bottom of the J area, where things are just bad. They don't see a lot of hope. We're not seeing a lot of ways out of this. We're just seeing the badness in the world, and we're kind of in the slump of the bottom bowl of the J. So that's where we're at. Is book 1 is where we're okay and getting worse. And now we're at it's pretty bad. So we're in despair mode at this bottom. So starting this book at a much darker note is showing where we're at in the story. We're at the low point of the story, the despair portion of the story. So if we compare the two startings, we've got that big comparison of tone and feel and how we're starting it in expectations. We also, I want to address that we're also moving into the beginning of this story much more quickly than we did at the beginning of book 1. Book 1 really eases you into it. We're kind of sliding into the story. We're getting to know the characters. We're getting to see what the world is like, what these people are like. It does start off with, instantly them running with the blue, with the blue crystal staff. There we go. And they're running from that, so there is some action and things like that. But really, it's much slower of an opening. We have the whole point of meeting together at the inn, the talking and the laughter and the just very basic setup. Here in the second book, we already know these characters. We already have seen things that they have gone through. We already know their backgrounds and their relationships, things like that. We already have background knowledge, so we're getting really into this story at a running pace. We basically have our little beginning to be like, this is our setup in the prologue, and then book 1, we're instantly like, okay, where are we going? What is the next step? Enough with the easing us into it. We already know these people. We're just throwing us back into the story and getting things going with instantly getting to Tarsus and instantly having trouble. I mean, yes, like I said, we did have that little chase scene at the beginning of book 1, but this is much darker. We already have the Draconians going on in the first 5 chapters. We've already got the splitting up of the group. Already things have gone bad. And worse than just needing to run away from the inn and stuff like that, this is to the point where, things have gotten bad quickly. Our whole entire group has split up, And we've got Raistlin saying that some of us might not meet in this world again. Things have gotten escalated very quickly. Sure, it's enough of a beginning that we didn't start like instantly, like bam, or right in the middle of a battle or something like that, but it's much of a quicker thing. We're not really developing the world so much. We're not developing these characters. We're not trying to ease the reader, into the story and into this world. We are like, this is the world, you already know it, we already know it, let's get going, and we're back, we're off to see what this story is going to do and where it's going to take us. So, in general, it has a lot of different aspects that have changed from the beginning of book 1 to the beginning of book 2. Let me know down in the comments if you like the beginning of this story and if you feel like it feels like a good beginning, and if it is what you were hoping for at the beginning of a continuation of this story. Go ahead and comment down below any thoughts and feelings that you have on that, or any questions that you have about anything that I've talked about so far. Okay, let me turn my notes over here and see where we're going next. Okay, so along with the starting, I kind of wanted to talk about how we have this feeling of taking stock of where we're at along with this beginning. So yes, it's a very quick beginning. We're kind of getting things going. We're doing things fairly quickly. We already have events that are taking place. But at the same time, I feel like in the background of it all, we're still kind of starting off with a taking stock of where we're at. And this is important, especially because it's the start of this book, but also because we did not start right where we left off. So the authors really have to fill the reader in on this is what's happened, this is what you've missed, this is where we're at, and this is all need to be understood so we can continue to move forward with our story. Because without that little gap or whatever, as a reader, we're going to be lost. So there's lots of little clues and hints and dialogues that help us see what was missed and what we're at now. We see the changes that have happened. We're seeing the darkness that has come into this space and why it's there. We are reevaluating everybody. We are completely, like, we've swept them off the board and we're like, okay, now this is where this character's at. This is where this character's at. This is this character's at. And this is how we got here. So that way when we move forward, despite not taking the time to fully explain and be with these characters during the gap portion, we at least know how we got here, why we're here, and what the deal is, so that way we can go ahead and move forward. So it's a little bit of like reorienting us into the story and reevaluating where we're at and what we're doing, so that way the reader can also move forward from the same point that the characters are moving forward. So we're not still back here while the characters are up here. The authors are now trying to be like, okay, we know you were here, but this is now here, and now we can move forward as one, together with our characters and see where the story is going to go. And that's very, very important, because otherwise the readers will be lost, us as readers. And so it's important as a writer to know, hey, your reader's going to be lost if you're going to jump time, and so you really have to immerse them into the present point and explain to them what is different and how we got there. So speaking of these changes and the starting point and things like that, I want to focus on Tanis. Because Tanis is, in my opinion, the character we see the most difference in between book 1 and book 2. Book 1, Tanis is a very, not that he believes he should be the leader, per se, or that he is like stuck up and like, I know where we should be doing, I know everything, like that's why I'm in charge. But he's not really an unsure person. He decides for himself and be like, okay, I've looked at all the possibilities. This is the possibility I think that we should go with. I'm going to do that, and I'm going to give everybody else the option because that's only right, is for everyone to have their own opinion and their own choice over what they do and where they go, especially when there's danger involved. But he's very assertive, and he's pretty confident in himself. He doesn't have too much vulnerability as a leader, though he doesn't always believe he might be the best leader. He pretty much steps up to the board and is like, okay, if I'm going to have to be the leader, I'm going to do the best job I can. I might not be perfect, but I'm going to at least step up to the plate and get us to where we should be going. And he's pretty confident in what he feels like as who he is. He's pretty confident in saying he's accepted everything that made him insecure before. He's pretty certain that he wants Kitiara over Laurana. Maybe not 100%, obviously he kept their rings and stuff like that, but he kind of feels like he knows where he's at. He doesn't feel lost or drowning or anything else like that. He's pretty much hey, I'm stepping up to the plate. I have a good grasp now on who I am. I've kind of got it together, even if I'm not perfect kind of vibe going on. Let me know in the comments below if you agree or disagree with that assessment. But that is what I really feel like the vibe we get from the first book, is that he doesn't feel like he's perfect. He doesn't feel like he's 100%, but he feels like he's kind of got it together enough to lead people and enough to know that he's not a perfect leader either. But here we really see at the beginning here that he is drowning. He is lost. He does not have any clue as to what should be happening. He doesn't know if he believes in going to Tarsus at the beginning. He goes because he knows he's going to be asked to go. He doesn't know if he even is leading these people right, if he should be having this responsibility. He doesn't know if he stands up to Elistan, who he feels like is wise and, yes, a little bit too attached to Laurana, but feels like he is subpar. He doesn't know if he's doing the right things anymore. He doesn't know what he should be doing or where he should be taking them, or if he should even be the leader at this point. His feelings for Laurana are kind of jumbled up in his head. He doesn't understand. He knows that he doesn't really want Kitiara, especially at the end when he's walking away from the inn. He kind of does figure out what he was thinking and how he was feeling. But he's a jerk to Laurana, despite the fact that he feels like he has misjudged her and that she has grown and become a strong woman, and that he is developing her feelings for her again, and that he actually does love her over Kitiara, especially, like I said, when he walks away, he finally kind of figures that out. But the first several chapters, he's just like, why am I feeling this way? And why am I lashing out at her for this? And I want to fix it, but at the same time, I can't stop being irritated and angry, especially with his jealousy for Elistan, which he doesn't want to admit is jealousy. His emotions are just roiling around inside him, and he, being especially the person that we see most of the story from at this point, he is just everywhere. He is lost and confused and unsure and just almost like a little kid again. He just doesn't know what he's supposed to be doing or if he's doing the right thing, and it bothers him because everybody's looking to him to do the right thing and to be trusted, and he doesn't know if that's him. He doesn't know if he's doing the right thing or what he should really be doing. He's just feels like he's just trying his best and not getting anywhere. So his whole entire stability that he had for the group, the kind of rock solid like leadership and like that he kind of held everybody together because he connected to each of them even when they didn't connect to each other, is gone out the window. I mean, he still has these connections. He still understands everybody better than they understand each other separately. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like how he understands Strum and he understands Tas, but Strum and Tas don't necessarily understand each other. So he still has these connections, but he's lost himself in the time that we saw him from the end of book 1 and the beginning of book 2. And he's really struggling with getting past that. So why do we think that Tanis is changed now versus in book 1? Because, I mean, like we mentioned, the people that we thought we saw significant changes in the first book. We mentioned that at least I thought that Tanis had not really changed much in book 1. So why, and even if he did, he wasn't significant. So why make it so he's changing at the beginning of this book? And really, I truly believe that there's kind of two things, is that he's kind of reflecting the winter portion, the low, the very bottom of the barrel of our J. He's really taken the hit from this whole adventure, and he is someone that, like, was trying to hold it together, but the second there was a breather, he's cracked, because there's not everyone wanting him and needing him to get it together and to be the leader, the strong leader that he's needed to be. So now that he had this moment to breathe and sit down and actually, like, realize that all this crap is happening, he's kind of broken. And I feel like a lot of that comes with kind of a reflection. The leader is reflecting the point in the story that we're at. We're at that low point. But I also feel like a little bit this change is important in the fact that that's why he was needed in book 1. Sorry, my camera's jostling a little bit. That was what was needed in book 1, was for him to be the strong leader. That was the important portion that he played in the first book. Now, I feel like the authors have given him a chance during this break to grow and change and to become unsure, because that is the setup for him to be able to grow and change, and for him to be able to be what is needed for this companion group in the second book. So he was needed to be one way for book 1, and now that we're starting book 2, which has already shown that the group is splitting apart, at least at this moment. Now we'll see if they get back together. But with Raistlin's statement, it's hard to say if they're gonna see each other ever again or not. So at this point, we see that the group is breaking down, and so Tanis is no longer the fearless, strong leader that's got it together and is leading his friends through this. He's breaking up just as much as the group is, and he will then be able to be at a starting point where he can move forward through this second book. We're not sure what he is being prepared for or what that is going to be when he moves forward, but at this point, we've kind of, the authors have kind of set him up to be able to start this journey in a new light, and hopefully then be able to be what is needed for this second leg of the journey. And we were going to see what happens, where they're going, and what the outcome is going to be. But I truly believe that right now the authors are really setting him up and making him be what is necessary for the next leg of his journey, especially with the group being broken down into 2 groups at this point. Let me know what you think of his change and what you see, and if you have any opinions on that down in the comments below. I'd really love to know. Okay, we got a couple more points to go. The next one is going to be, I want to take a moment to discuss Raistlin. So, since we're talking about characters and change and things, I kind of want us to talk on Raistlin, not because he necessarily has changed as a character or grown or anything else like that, but that we get this little insight when he talks to Laurana. And I feel like that is an important thing to bring up at this point. Sorry, I'm sweating in here, so I'm trying to, like, cool myself down. It's not working very well. We see him in a new light because he's opened up to Laurana and he's told her his past. He tells her a little bit, not everything. He's still holding back on whatever happened in the tower that only him and Caramon know about at this point. But he does mention a little bit about the tower and what he gave up to have the powers that he had, and his naivete, thinking that he was all-powerful so young. He talks a bit about Tanis and his leadership, and he talks a bit about his sister and how important she was to the twin brothers, because otherwise they would have died because their parents didn't want them, didn't feel like they were going to survive, so they were going to just chuck them out and let them die. So we get a new perspective on Raistlin, and I find it interesting that we not only get this information from his own lips, no doubt, but also that he tells it to Laurana. So I'll admit that I'm not sure what we really get from him telling us. Yes, we get this new perspective. We see the hardships that he's had, how close his sister is to them, how much she's loved them. We see that he has had a deeper understanding of himself, especially when he calls himself naive before, and thinking that he was all powerful and realizing that he wasn't. We see that he's gone through horrible things with whatever that point that he doesn't want to mention about the Tower of High Sorcery. We see a lot of these different aspects, but I'm not really sure what it is that we learn about Raistlin, or how it changes the perspective. Raistlin is such an enigma. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know his motivations from this. I don't know who he really is, what it is that he really wants other than more power. I feel like even though usually information about a character then leads you to understand this character better, I feel like I just feel more confused. Everything I learn about Raistlin just makes me more confused. So I'm not sure at this point what it is that we get from his talk. I really, really, really would love it if you had any comments or any thoughts of your own, and you insert them down below, because I feel like I need help to understand Raistlin. Me and my dad both really love this story, and both of us have mentioned that we're really never sure. That's something that we both have in common, is that we never really know Raistlin. We never really feel like we understand him or get what his motivations are or anything. So please, if you have any ideas or comments, or if you're just as confused as me even, comment down below, because I'd really love to have a discussion about it and to hear your thoughts. But along with that, I kind of want to discuss a little bit about why we chose Laurana to talk about it with. And I feel like with Laurana, we do see a little portion of Raistlin, especially when he talks about how he sees her, and since she's so young as an elf, he doesn't look like she's dying. She looks as young as she does now, which is very interesting. But so I wonder if that's a little bit of the reason that he feels like he can connect with her a bit more, is because she's the only thing that really feels like it's alive to him, that she's the only living being around him. But I also wonder if maybe he tells her this because even though he doesn't know, like he said with that premonition that he had about not meeting in this world, and he wasn't sure why he said it, I wonder if he has a feeling about Laurana and that she needs this information, that this is going to be important for her. As we continue to see where she goes, we can go ahead and discuss what we feel like this discussion has done for her, but I really feel like Raistlin might be setting her up to be where she needs to be, giving her the knowledge and the understanding and the perspective that she's going to need to continue to go through this book and to grow, because we know that she's one of the characters that has been growing fairly quickly. She came in toward the end of the book and she was very naive and she followed them or whatever, but we do see that change in the battle at the end where she makes her first kill, where she's already kind of changing, and we see her already kind of changed again with her being really proactive and wanting to help people and really more mature, especially with her interactions with Tanis. She's no longer throwing herself all over him. She's really like, hey, get your crap together. Like, I might still love you, but this is no reason to act like this. Like, she's finally been like seeing things as they are and really feeling like she sees Tanis and people in her group for who they truly are. And so I kind of wonder if this is part of her growth, is hearing the story from Raistlin, and if from this story she's going to be set up or have a better perspective or have more knowledge or whatever else for where the authors are going to take her. So we'll go ahead and revisit this when we see more of Laurana and see more of where she is going, and if we think that this has set her up or not in the end. That's just the feeling I have about the whole situation. But, like, again, we'll see where it goes. Now let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the section in chapter 2. It's like the first half of the chapter where we have the unnamed new Dragon High Lord that is part of the Dark Queen's army, as well as her Dragon Sky. Now, we've had times like this where we see the enemies portion a little bit, but we never really see it quite so long. Like, we don't have quite such a lengthy portion that is dedicated to the evil dragons or the bad guys or whatever else you want to decide that they're called. We don't see as much of the flip side, but this time we had a pretty good lengthy discussion, pretty lengthy viewpoint of the enemy and what they know and what they're planning. And so this is another way for the author to really rack up the suspension and the suspense and the tension and the concern that we have for the companions. This is another technique that is new to the beginning of the story, because the last book 1 that we started off with didn't have really any at all. We didn't have any point of views from the enemy side. We were all just from the companions until we reached Pax Tharkus, where they're going to be, where they fought the dragon. That's the only time that we see much of the enemy until the very, very end with Verminiard. So with this, we're already starting off with plunging us into the enemy and really racking up the suspense, because we know that the enemy knows that they are going to Tarsus. They know about the refugees in the mountain. They know all of these things, and they have plans to intercept them and to do things that we don't know, but they're planning on capturing or doing something with the companions, and some in particular. We don't know which particular ones the new person is looking for, but the person knows their names and is singling them out, and will probably have the kill the rest if that I don't need mentality. So it's very interesting for them to already be racking up the tension so high. It's again with the despair and the pessimism and things like that. We're already starting off with, like, the bad guys know. The bad guys know what's happening. You don't have a leg up. You're not safe. Things are bad. They could just go to the mountains and kill them. Like, I mean, obviously they would have to break down the mountains, but it's like they already know, and they're 5 steps ahead. So again, we kind of have this dark, pessimistic viewpoint, and we really are stressed from the beginning, like, oh my gosh, they already are onto you. What is going to happen? How are they going to get out of this when the enemy is already ahead of them? So it's a really good tactic to show every now and then the enemy at precise moments, being like, hey, you thought that they were being so clever, but really they're not, and they're in trouble, and how are they going to get out of this, and what exactly does the enemy want with the companions, things like that. So we don't know what's going to happen, and we just know, and we don't know when it's going to happen. We just know that something is going to happen, and we're kind of just waiting, like, oh, well, when are they going to interfere? When is this going to happen? When do we see the enemy attack? Because we know it, and the companions don't. So we know more than they do. They think that they're fine. They think that they're safe. They don't think that there's any dragon high lords in the area or any dragons. They don't think that things are going well, especially with the the city being landlocked. Like, they were hoping it would still have the seas, but at this point, they don't have any reason to really be truly concerned about their safety, when really we know that they should be. And so that anxiety of them just being leisurely and taking their time and not knowing any the wiser, and we do, and so we're like, come on, and we're waiting and waiting and waiting for the enemy to make its move. So Margaret Weiss and Tracy Sigmund are really, really good about balancing enough, giving us just enough hint as a reader that's extra to have us concerned and to have us be like wanting to read more and wanting to know what's happening next. Okay, we're getting to the end, folks. Thanks for sticking with me through such a long episode. The last little thing I want to do is the nitty-gritty stuff. I really just want to go ahead and have a small little conversation, sorry about that, of just a couple of things. Not really analyzing it, not really like having a in-depth discussion on these things, but I have 3 little nitty-gritty items that I just want us to keep in mind, and just that, I always think it's interesting, and that I want us to like I said, keep in mind as we go through, because it's important to the storyline and things like that. So the first thing is Raistlin's ominous statement at the inn. For me, it's page 36. I'm going to go ahead and read the little section of it, because it's pretty powerful. This is when they're waiting for the soldiers to arrive that Tass warned them about in order to arrest them, and they're splitting up their group. And let's see if I can find it. They gave all the weapons to Raistlin and the other group that was staying behind. Okay. We've got... Yes, he whispered, there is always the worm. Do not fear, knight. Your weapon is safe, as are the lives of those you leave in our care, if any are safe. Farewell, my friends, he hissed, his strange, hourglass eyes gleaming, and a long farewell it will be. Some of us are not destined to meet again in this world. With that he bowed, and gathered his red robes around him, and began to climb the stairs. Trust Raistlin to exit with a flourish, Tanis thought irritably, hearing booted feet near the door. Go on, he ordered. If he's right, there's nothing we can do about it now. I find the statement so interesting, and especially because Laurana addresses him and wonders why he said it, and he even says he's not sure. So we're gonna see if he's right. But Raistlin always has this sense about him that he seems to know things, even though obviously he himself doesn't know why he knows these things, but he has this sense of knowing before he even knows that he knows, and a sense of foresight and things like that, that you can just tell that he has, and he speaks these things, and everyone's reeling from them with his flourishes, as Tanis said, but they're really ominous, and it's almost like with everybody else as a reader, you're also being like, is that true? What does he mean by that, and what's going to happen? So again, we have another portion of suspense with that, seeing what does that mean? So just let's keep that statement in mind and see if what he says comes to pass. I feel like that's going to be really important, is just seeing, because Raistlin never says anything that should not be said. Even in the beginning with the hammer, talking about the constellations being gone, things like that, he always seems to know things. And so I feel like this is a quote that we should really keep in mind for the moment as we continue through this book. The second nitty-gritty item I wanted to go ahead and talk about was Raistlin, when he's talking to Laurana, he mentions the reason that he follows Tanis. And that for me was on page 49. Again, I'm going to read it just because it's a couple sentences long. So he's talking about how he listens to his feelings, and that's why he's a good leader, because that's required. And Laurana says, I notice you leave out yourself. If you are as intelligent and powerful as you claim, why do you follow Tanis? Raistlin's hourglass eyes were dark and hooded. He stopped talking as Raistlin as Caramon brought his twin a cup and carefully poured water from the kettle. The warrior glanced at Laurana, his face dark, embarrassed, and uncomfortable, as always whenever his brother went on like this. Raistlin did not seem to notice. Pulling a pouch from his pack, he sprinkled some green leaves into the hot water. A pungent, acrid smell filled the room. I do not follow him. The young mage looked up at Laurana. For the time being, Tanis and I simply happen to be traveling in the same direction. So, does that mean that at some point they will not be traveling in the same direction? That is the question. I find it a really stick-out worthy statement. I feel like, especially because they cut it off and they transferred to Strum and Tanis in that group, that you really feel it in your body, in your mind when he says it, and then we cut to the other group. So it's a really powerful statement, and I feel like it leaves a lot of possibility of wondering, okay, well, if right now you're just following the same direction, where is Raistlin going? And why is he following the same direction? And where does he plan on going when he splits? Will they split? Like, what exactly is going to happen? This is another reason why I feel like Raistlin is such an enigma. You never really know anything. He's always so cryptic, and even when he's telling you something, you're not really sure what he means or what that means in the future for him. So we're going to go ahead and see what happens with that statement as well. Raistlin's 2 for 2 in these chapters. And then the last thing I want to just mention really briefly is the entrance of Alhana, who is the princess of the Sylvanisty elves. We just need to, obviously she is a new character that is being introduced, so I just wanted to give her a little bit of a shout out, even though she was barely mentioned just at the end. Especially because Tanis talks about the instant love he sees that Strum has for her. The second he looks upon her, it's like he's fallen in love with her, and he knows that Strum is in trouble because Alhana will not want a human, no matter how noble he is. He already knows that by her beliefs and how their people are, their portion of elves are, is that she will not want anything to do with him. So we're going to see where it goes with her, especially because her being a princess and her being an elf and her entrance the way it is and how they've kind of now been linked a little bit in the end of this chapter. We're going to see how important she is and to see where she is going to lead them and if she's going to be a prominent new character or not. Whew. All right, that was a lot of information for our class today. I hope everything came across nice and clear. If not, go ahead and let me know in the comments below any comments, concerns, or questions. I always want to talk to you. I always want to have a conversation. I always want to hear what you have to say and help us learn, each other learn. Yeah, so I feel like we're starting off strong with this book. I can't wait to continue reading and to hear what you guys think about it. Yeah, I think my brain is always freezing up, and I'm so sorry about that. I'm trying really hard to make it so that's not the case. I feel like once I get going, I'm good. Sometimes my brain and my mind is going a bit too fast for my mouth to say things. So the next video, we're going to be doing chapters 6 through 10, which in my book, let me check, I forgot to write it down. In my book, it's going to be pages 55 through 119. So go ahead and read those for the next video, and I will see you then. Hope you have a wonderful day and that you enjoyed this class, and I'll see you next time. Bye!